and welcome back to Zilog and Moto. I'm your host Dave, and this is your weekly look at the English language 8 and 16-bit Sega console library of games, consisting of releases for the Master System, Genesis or Mega Drive if you prefer, Sega CD or Mega CD, again depending on what side of the Atlantic you're on, and finally the 32X. Also, I mention this occasionally. Yes, technically the Sega SG-1000, Sega's original console, should be included in that list, but unless I hit the lottery or some unexpectedly large inheritance, it ain't happening. It's hard enough to collect some of the 1,275 that I am for this list. Like, say, for instance, this Brazilian exclusive Master System title, Bonkers Wax Up, that I was ecstatic to finally find a complete version on eBay until I saw the price. If you see me favoring my right side during the camera segments, don't worry, that's just some soreness from the kidney I had to sell to afford that one. All joking aside, I've been on this journey for close to 2.5 years or so, uploading a new review each week, and I'll be doing this for a long time to come. So if this interests you at all, I'd heartily recommend you subscribe or leave a comment, and who knows, maybe I'll see you at a future convention and we can discuss these games in person. Now, for the game of the week this week, well, it's not Bonkers. Not sure when I'll review that, but since it's technically a Sega Club title and the only one to be released for the Master System, I'll probably tie that in with that series somehow. No, instead we're going in a wildly different direction genre-wise, but sticking with the Master System and reviewing a game that actually appeared in the United States, releasing here in April of 1988, a month after its release in PAL territories. And that game is Rescue Mission, a first-party title developed internally at Sega. Rescue Mission is one of those games that I've been curious about for a long time, as before doing this review, I really knew nothing about it, but it's got some cool-looking artwork for the era, as this was released after Tonka was put in charge of distribution for the Master System, and say what you will about them not knowing much about video games, at least they knew that Sega desperately needed to up their cover art game. We'll take a closer look at that art in a minute when we're looking at the package, but even though Rescue Mission is kind of a generic name, that compiled with the cover art really made me think of jungly action movies from the time period like Commando, Rambo First Blood Part 2, and Missing in Action. However, there's one thing that I wasn't expecting about this game when I picked it out for review this week, and that's this. It's this little note here. Light phaser required. Apparently, Rescue Mission is a light gun game, and not just a light gun game, but the phaser is the only way to play it, so there's no option to use a controller to move around the cursor on the screen, which is probably for the best because that just never seems to work out properly. What this means for me, though, is that I'll be playing this one through emulation, so if the review looks a little different than normal, that's why. Previously on Zilog and Moto, I've looked at other light phaser games on the Master System like the original pack-in Safari Hunt, Shooting Gallery, and then Marksman Shooting and Trap Shooting, which appeared in several combo carts, and to say that they've been of varying quality is putting it lightly. However, I've got a good feeling about Rescue Mission, so hopefully it ends up more Shooting Gallery than Marksman Shooting. We'll find out if I'm right just after a closer look at the package. And this is Rescue Mission for the Master System. This copy is in fantastic shape. I couldn't ask for much better. The outer cover is immaculate, with no scratches or dings or tears anywhere, with the hang tab intact at the top of the case. It looks like it did when I was sitting on a store shelf 33 years ago, so I'm very happy about that. I'm not one that wants or needs sealed copies of games, as my goal is definitely to play them, but I can definitely appreciate a copy like this that could have easily been dropped out of a time portal. I'm assuming that due to the fact this is a light gun game, it probably hasn't been played much, if at all, in the last 30 years, which is probably contributing to its condition. This actually makes 2 weeks in a row with titles that have been near mint quality, but Rescue Mission is even a notch above NHLPA Hockey 93 was last week, and you'll see why in a minute. As far as the cover art goes, I think this looks fantastic. It's got the traditional white crosshatched Master System background and the name in blue typeset font at the top. But what really makes this cover work is that it pairs that basic formatting
with art that fills just enough of the lower portion of the cover and then leaves room for the Sega logo at the bottom corner. And the art's solid as well, with an awesome action shot of a medic on a handcar, and yes, I had to look up what the proper name was for that, dodging enemies that are both firing and getting shot in the background. While there's some inherent limitations to using this format for the cover, I think this is about as good as it gets, or at least as good as I can remember seeing, and if I was a Master System owner in 1988, seeing this on the shelf would totally draw me in. Also, two other quick notes: it's part of the Mega Cartridge series, so that means it's a 1 megabit game, similar to Shooting Gallery, and much bigger than those other light gun games I mentioned previously, so that's a good sign. Finally, and this is super nerdy, and I'm sure only very few people care about this, but as far as I know, this is the only Light Phaser game where the star on the cover that says Light Phaser is in green. All the others I'm aware of are in pink. Not sure why that is, but this is the last light gun game released for the Master System before they switched to the newer cover formatting, so I'm assuming someone just messed up. Flipping over the back, and we've got the standard early Master System rear cover format of 2 screenshots at the top, followed by flavor text below. These screenshots are decent and feature 2 different levels of the game, which is always nice for some variety. The flavor text below is great too. I'm not going to read all of it, but this section stands out. Jet troopers, rockets and grenades, infantry and landmines. It's you against them all in one of the meanest battlegrounds ever created. Now that is a fantastic line. It does a great job of selling the game and makes it sound very exciting. Opening the case up, and here's why I said Rescue Mission is in even better shape than NHLPA Hockey 93 was last week. Just look at that crisp, flat manual and shiny label on the cartridge. This manual looks like it's never been read, and you definitely don't see that every day. As I gently open it up to show you, it's got a nice intro section at the beginning laying out the plot of the game, and then goes into describing how to play the game, the different power-ups that can be obtained, and the 3 different medics that you're trying to protect along with their characteristics, all laid out with some nice screenshots and charts, complete with the traditional Sega high score charts at the back for keeping track of just how well you did. Okay, that's the package. Let's get to the game and see just what Rescue Mission is bringing to the table, and if light gun enthusiasts, or anyone for that matter, should take an interest in Rescue Mission. Light gun games are always about one thing: shooting targets on the screen, and providing the player with some hot and heavy action while they test their accuracy. However, what really makes a light gun game work is what you're shooting on the screen. This is the reason why I reviewed games like Trap Shooting, Safari Hunt, and especially Marksman Shooting poorly, but a title like Lethal Enforcers fared a lot better. Even Crowd Patrol was a much more interesting game than those first 3, and it would have merited at least a 3-star rating had the game not been so incredibly difficult in places with poor timing and odd hitboxes. While basic target shooting games were a staple in the early days of the genre, they pretty quickly grew old, and for good reason. Who wants to just do the same thing over and over and over again? Rescue Mission is definitely not just a target shooting game, and in fact, you could actually call it a legitimate arcade-styled game that's much more in line with Lethal Enforcers than those other titles. The game is exactly as the title indicates, and rather than a shooting gallery, the game has a distinct plot. During some unnamed conflict, the army has seen numerous casualties while fighting the enemy. For some unexplained reason, the conflict seems to be a fight over rail yards, as, for whatever reason, all the injured men are next to tracks. Due to this, the powers that be have seen fit to send in a company of medics into the field using handcarts to travel on the tracks from one soldier to another, before eventually making it safely to the next base of operations. So, where do you come in? Well, the medics need significant fire cover as they attempt to make their way down the rails to the different injured soldiers, so it's your job to provide that cover, and attempt to shoot anything and everything on the screen. Well, except for the medics and the injured soldiers, that is. While the medics are attempting to complete their mission, you'll be tasked with taking out enemy soldiers, special forces, mines on the tracks, and, if the enemy gets the jump on you, shooting their attacks out of the sky from bullets to rockets. In each area, the medics will have to take care of 8 injured soldiers, and it's your job to make sure they survive long enough to complete their mission in each of 5 individual theaters of conflict. Or, if you prefer smaller words, the game has 5 levels. Sometimes I get a little carried away trying to spice these reviews up a bit. Anyway, that all sounds pretty straightforward, right? But wait, there's more. Just like in real life, people don't have multiple lives. What that means is that while you get 3 chances to make it through the game, each of those chances isn't just an attempt with the same generic-looking medic. Instead, each of your quote-unquote lives is actually a different medic. You start out playing the game as Mike, a beginner medic that is relatively slow at moving down the tracks and treating the injured soldiers. If Mike is taken out, you then restart the last level you made it to as Steve. Steve is referred to as a lazy medic, which is a bit harsh, I think. Steve actually moves the quickest out of any of the medics, but since he's more of a sprinter in that regard, he has to stop occasionally to catch his breath between soldiers, leaving you to protect him while he takes a break. Finally, if Steve is hurt, you move on to your last medic, John. John is referred to as honest, which, again, I think there might be some English translation issues here, which is a little odd since this game wasn't released in Japan. More on that in a minute. But in reality, John is essentially a more experienced version of Mike, as he moves around the tracks faster than Mike, but not quite as fast as John. However, he doesn't have to stop for breaks like John does. To me, this multiple character system, especially with each character having different abilities, doesn't really affect you too much, as you've still got to shoot everyone regardless. But it also makes the game incredibly unique. How many games can you think of where whenever you lost a life, you had to continue on with a completely different character that has different abilities? Just off the top of my head, the only games I can even think of that does something remotely similar to this is Double Dragon 3 on the NES, or perhaps maybe the first Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles on that same platform, but this predates either of those by over a year. Along with the novel concept of having the multiple playable characters, think about this next bit for a second. Rescue Mission is literally a light gun game where your character is navigating a level in a handcar on a rail, and you have no control over the medic's progress through the level. It just happens as it happens. However, more modern light gun games, like the aforementioned Lethal Enforcers or Crime Patrol, and then the more popular Sega arcade titles like the Virtua Cop or House of the Dead series, are called rail shooters, because you have no control over your character's movement, and you progress throughout the level, as if you're in a rail car that you can't control. So it wouldn't be that much of a stretch to call Rescue Mission the first rail shooter. See what I did there? Okay, I'll stop, but I thought it was an interesting corollary. As far as the game itself goes, like I mentioned earlier, it's pretty straightforward. Just shoot almost everything in sight while avoiding your medic and the 8 soldiers on the map that you're trying to help. Doing so, however, is a little easier said than done, at least as far as the soldiers are concerned. Usually you're not going to make a mistake and shoot your medic unless an enemy or projectile gets really close and your accuracy just happens to be a bit off. All of the soldiers are color-coded, with your guys being in green, the enemy in white, and then the enemy's special forces in red. But even with that color coding, sometimes when the action gets really frenetic, it's not uncommon to accidentally hit your own guy. Oops. Thankfully, shooting the guys that you're trying to save isn't the end of the world, but it does affect your point totals and ratings at the end of the level, which is where your score is based out of how many men that you save, and how many of the enemies and special forces that you take out. Shooting your medic, on the other hand, will cause him to temporarily be stunned and stop moving on the tracks, but thankfully he won't take damage from you. The medics all have 3 units of health, but explosive items will do 3 units of damage, resulting in an instant kill, so it's key to prioritize targets on the screen and take out any explosive items first before firing on the enemy. As you save your soldiers, each one will offer an item to protect the medics from the special forces' attacks, or offer up health items that double as smart bombs that take out all the enemies on the screen if your medic already happens to have full health when you shoot it. And let me tell you, it's incredibly satisfying to see a whole group of enemies taken out with one shot. The game has 3 difficulty levels that can be chosen when starting a game. However, there's not a huge difference between them, just the presence of more enemies, and they tend to be a bit faster on the trigger with projectiles the further up you go. Your ammo is unlimited, so there's no concerns about having to shoot a specific target or fire off screen and reload. It's just blast, blast, blast to your heart's content. I think my only complaint is the one-hit kills. I don't mind that the mines and the tracks, that makes sense, but getting hit once by a regular enemy, not even a special forces type, can be a bit annoying. From a graphical perspective, this looks like a 1 megabit game. And I don't mean that in a bad way, in fact it's just the opposite. Smaller, simpler games like Safari Hunt, Marksman Shooting, and Trap Shooting all look pretty quickly thrown together, and that's part of why I didn't rate them too highly. But then Shooting Gallery, with its similar 1 megabit size, actually looked like a real game with proper action, and as a result, it's simply a better title. The same is true for Rescue Mission, and I would say that Rescue Mission looks even better than that title. Each of the 5 levels has a unique look, properly representing that level, with level 1 being a jungle, level 2 being a dense swamp, level 3 being a local village, level 4 being a section of bridges over water that has a nice movement effect, by the way, and finally level 5 being the enemy's ammo depot. Each of the levels is colorful, and the action on screen moves around well, with only minimal flickering due to the game usually keeping sprites off the same horizontal line. One small detail that I really appreciated was your medic's uniform. You start out levels with a standard green uniform, but as your character takes damage, you can actually tell visually by how the medic looks on screen, with his uniform getting progressively more bloody and torn. Sound-wise, Rescue Mission is an interesting title. Earlier I mentioned how the game hadn't been released in Japan. Coming out in mid-1988, the Master System Mark III releases had started to dry up, even worse than in the United States, with the Mega Drive being just around the corner in October. The reason why I mention all this is because Rescue Mission is one of 18 titles to have not been released in Japan, and yet still features a special soundtrack for use with the FM sound unit that was only released for the Mark III. When playing the game, I tried out both the regular and the FM soundtrack, and I came out with about the same experience I usually have with these titles that have dual soundtracks, which is that while I certainly can tell the difference between the two in both the music and sound effects, ultimately, I don't really think the FM version is that much better. Certain things sound better for sure, especially with the music, but the original soundtrack isn't bad, and I actually prefer the original sound effects. If you have the ability to try both, do so and pick your favorite, but if you only have original US hardware, the standard version sounds good as well. All told, I had a lot of fun messing with Rescue Mission this week. While it's not particularly a deep game, it is enjoyable, and playing on the harder difficulty levels will definitely provide an action-packed experience for anyone. I can confidently say that so far, Rescue Mission is the best light gun game I've played on the Master System, and I definitely recommend it to anyone that likes some old school phaser action. For that, I'm giving Rescue Mission 3 stars.
Okay, that was Rescue Mission. I had a good feeling about this game when I picked it up off the shelf to review it this week, and I'm glad to say that was an accurate feeling. So far in doing these reviews, it seems kind of like that light gun titles are either pretty dull or nice and entertaining, allowing you to waste more time playing the game than you would normally expect. In recording the footage for this review, there was a time when I thought I'd only been playing the game for about 15 minutes, and then looked down at the clock and an hour had gone by instead. And that's when you know you've got a quality title. Next week on Zilog and Moto, it's time to fire up the good old Model 1 Sega CD again. Like with the 2 previous Sega CD reviews this year, I'll be reviewing a game where I've already looked at the Genesis version during the first year of Zilog and Moto, so now it's time to check out the upgraded version and see what makes it special. At least, I really hope there's something about it that makes it worth playing again, because the Genesis version of this game wasn't exactly my favorite title, and it had some notable issues. I try to stay positive with expectations when I really don't know what to expect, but one notable thing about this game is that the Sega CD version was only sold in a dual game release with another Sony ImageSoft title, whereas the other game in that package, Hook, had its own solo release. So I'm not exactly feeling the confidence from Sony here. Please remember to subscribe if you like this video, and remember, whatever you like to play, have fun, and be excellent to each other. Later.